Imagine you're hiking through a forest. A single honeybee flies toward you and stings your arm. You swat it away and it falls to the ground. Fight over? Not exactly. Because even though the bee is gone, the attack isn't. Hidden in your skin, its stinger is still working. Venom keeps pumping into the wound. And the bee is dying. Why would evolution create a weapon that kills the animal using it? In order to understand, we must shrink down to the size of a bee. At first glance, a bee stinger looks like a tiny needle. But under a microscope, it's something completely different. Instead of one smooth spike, it's covered in tiny backward-facing barbs. Almost like a fish hook. When a worker honeybee stings another insect, those barbs usually don't matter. The stinger slides back out. The bee survives. But mammals are different. Our skin is thick. Once those microscopic hooks sink in, they refuse to let go. As the bee tries to pull away, the stinger stays behind. But here's the part almost nobody realizes. The bee doesn't just leave behind the stinger. She tears away an entire section of her abdomen. Along with muscles, venom glands, and a venom sac. It's less like dropping a needle and more like ripping the engine out of a car while it's still running. And somehow, that makes the attack even more effective. Because the detached stinger isn't dead, the tiny muscles continue firing automatically. Which means even after the bee has flown away or tried to, the sting keeps injecting venom. It's a tiny biological machine programmed to finish its job, even without the bee attached. Which raises an even bigger question. If this weapon is so devastating, why would evolution ever build it this way? Surely bees that survived after stinging would have had the advantage. Except this isn't true for every bee. A queen bee usually survives. A bumblebee does too. So why is the worker honey bee the one paying the ultimate price? Because the biggest mistake we make is assuming the individual bee is what matters most. But the hive is. At first, that sounds ridiculous. Because when you look at a beehive, you don't see one creature. You see thousands. Thousands of wings. Thousands of legs. Each bee looks separate. Each bee moves on its own. But evolution is not only protecting one bee. It is protecting the colony. And that starts with a brutal truth. Most worker honey bees will never have babies. They spend their lives cleaning the hive, feeding larvae, guarding the entrance, and defending a queen who may lay thousands of eggs in a single day. So when a worker bee dies, she usually isn't losing her own future offspring. She's protecting the future of the colony, her mother as well as her sisters, and thousands of bees that carry many of the same genes. This is why the stinger makes sense. Evolution was not trying to build the safest weapon for the bee. It was building the most effective defense system for the hive. A smooth stinger might let the bee survive. But a barbed stinger does something more brutal. It locks into thick mammal skin. It breaks off from the bee. It keeps pumping venom. And it makes the attacker remember. That is the critical part. The worker honeybee does not die because evolution failed. She dies because the weapon works too well. Not for her, but for the hives. And once you see that, her death stops looking like a flaw. It starts looking like a trade. One tiny body for the survival of a colony. But that answer creates one more problem. Nature knows how to build a reusable stinger. We see it in queen and bumblebees, so why give worker honeybees one that destroys them? Because not all bees are built for the same job. A queen is the reproductive future of the colony. Her stinger is smoother and mostly used against rival queens. A stinger that tears out after one use would be terrible for that job. Bumblebees are different too. They can usually sting, pull out, and survive. But the worker honeybee's stinger is specialized for one extreme purpose: defend the hive at any cost. Which brings us to the real question. What exactly is behind that entrance that is worth dying for? Not just the queen. Not just the larvae. But everything the colony has built. The nursery. The workers. And something the colony spends its entire life making. A golden emergency fuel supply, built from millions of tiny flights, passed from bee to bee, and sealed inside wax. Honey. But honey is not just something sweet. To the hive, honey is survival. Flowers do not bloom forever. Winter comes. Drought comes. So while the world is warm and full of flowers, bees collect the energy of summer and store it for the future. That is what honey really is. The hive's survival battery. A way to keep thousands of bees alive when the flowers are gone. And that is what makes the hive such a target. To a bear, a skunk, or a hungry animal in the forest, a beehive is not just a nest. It is a treasure chest, packed with sugar, larvae, and months of labor. Everything the colony needs to survive is stored in one fragile home. That is why the entrance matters. It is the border between the colony and every threat outside it. Behind that entrance is the queen. the honey, the next generation. And standing at that border are workers. Tiny insects with a weapon that only makes sense when you understand what is behind them. Because now the sting is no longer just a sting. It is the final defense of a living city. When a worker honey bee stings, she is protecting something bigger than herself. Evolution did not design her stinger to save her life. It designed it to make the attacker stop. The worker honey bee dies because her weapon is not built to come back. It is built to stay behind, to keep fighting, to make the attacker remember, and to protect the hive, even at the cost of one bee. So the next time you see a honey bee hovering over a flower or buzzing a little too close to your arm, remember this. You are not just looking at an insect. You are looking at one tiny part of one of the most sophisticated societies nature has ever built. And if that bee ever gives her life, it is not because evolution failed her. It is because the hive turned one tiny body into a weapon so effective that even in death, it keeps fighting.